Dr. Block. He's a physician botanist who is widely known for his anthuriums, but he has many other plants that he specializes in and grows. How did you get started?
My grandmother, she came to Florida right after World War II and opened up the first flower shop in Miami Beach. Back then, there was no big box stores, things like that. And actually, she was resourced to do the original interior of a hotel called the Fontainebleau Hotel when it was built in the mid-1950s. So I learned most of what I did through my maternal grandmother. And so as a kid, 50 years ago, I moved here from New York, and I did so because my parents loved it. No kid wants to leave wherever they grow up. But after coming here and realizing that I could do sports all year or go swimming and things like that, I quickly became cold aversive and realized that it wasn't only the sports outside, but everything in nature when you engage outdoors. So even where we're sitting now, looks like we're partly outdoors, but in fact, we're inside, and yet I love bringing the outside in because plants are what make the world. They drive the engine that really gives all other life forms, animals, life forms, what they need. And long before there were animals, there were plants. So evolution, even biochemically, starts with plants that then lends itself to animals. Here in life, I went from knowing plants to wanting to learn more about the supporting science and chemistry in particular, and I found that the chemistry of plant-based molecules closely resembled animals. And you wouldn't think that plants were closely related to animals until you look at that particular structure. And in fact, some of the secrets are as plain as hemoglobin and chlorophyll, two essential molecules to humans, and animals have hemoglobin versus plants, and they're remarkably similar. And the same way that a farmer gets chlorophyll to do what it's designed to do, support the plant's energy, that's magnesium. There's a chemical suggestion because, as any farmer knows, if you have a plant that's deficient in magnesium, chlorophyll will not work to its potential. As any doctor knows, if you have a patient who's deficient in iron, in particular women when they have in childbirth, those months of pregnancy, you need to optimize hemoglobin by making sure there's enough iron. Chlorophyll and hemoglobin are identical molecules except for those two features, magnesium versus iron. And without getting too scientific, let's say that you can be a plant doctor with information from becoming a people doctor, and the two really do historically connect. Because long before there were doctors like we think of as licensed physicians, ancient healers in their nomadic tribes had to be excellent in sustaining plants because that's where their medicines came from, even back then. And if a healer couldn't sustain a plant, they would have lost their formulary and not be regarded as a good healer or a plant person, right?
Yeah.
There's an ancient connection between health, healing, and botany, and that's sort of where I fell into at this stage of my career because of having some academic background, but more importantly than that, working with plants since I was a kid.
You're known for the Anthurium, but that's not really how you started. And that's not really what you have everywhere here. I mean, you do have Anthurium, but there's so many other plants. Like,
The
can you
world's
tell us about
fascinating
them?
that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sure. I didn't start with anthuriums, but I was fortunate enough to move and relocate to South Florida, where plants are bountiful because outside of Hawaii, we're the only other subtropical area in the continental United States. So the reason that's important, it gave me a lot of choices of what I could work with. So 50 years ago, people are really attracted to orchids, pretty flowers, exotic. Orchids and bromeliads was one of my first plant groups that was a favorite, are both things that grow up in trees. They have to rely on these natural surroundings for good ventilation, good light, and yet an orchid, when it's not flowering, for the most part, it's not that pretty of a plant. I found bromeliads to be particularly pretty. Both have long-lasting flowers when they do bloom, and so that goes back to the early 1980s, when even then I was president of the Bromeliad Society of South Florida. But we hosted here in Miami a world conference. And so I found that there were people coming from all over the world to Miami where we're hosting and supposed to share our expertise in that particular plant family. Well, we have certain botanical gardens here in Florida which feature many different plant societies, including bromeliads, orchids, ferns, aeroids, are real big now. And in the last several years, Miami has been the hub for the International Aeroid Society's annual sale and show. So it's in my backyard.
It is.
And so for years, I've been growing aeroids, including anthuriums, but it's not just growing them to just keep the same thing as going. There's an evolution even in the time of one gardener or botanist's life or career when you can do things that create something that maybe hasn't been seen before by hybridizing. So I find that hybridizing is something, again, with a medical background, made it easier for me to understand what are known as Mendelian genetics. What do you do to take the features of one plant and combine it with another so that you can make an offspring that has perhaps the best features of one or both parents? And after doing that for generation after generation, not my generation, but the plants, I had things here that I had always just grown privately since I'm not a commercial vendor, I hadn't been for all of my life. First plants I ever made available for sale where I'm the developer, I don't sell them directly, wasn't until about a year ago. And yes, since that time, there's people all around the world now who know that I grow certain kinds of anthuriums, that it's still part of an evolution. There are things coming that I haven't made available or released yet because they're not quite ready for how I'd like to present them. Either they haven't quite met the standards that I'd like to see in the plant for a new color form, new vein pattern, new leaf size. These are all things to where instead of releasing something prematurely, which looks maybe too much like something else, I like them to be unique that way. And so when somebody gets something that at least comes from the genetics that I believe are different than most other places in the world, to me, that's just a way to share them. And I like doing that. I shared tens of thousands of plants over my life with botanical gardens and individuals. And I enjoy doing that. That's just what neighborly farmers do, whether it's somebody across the street or somebody across the world, which is what's so wonderful about doing it now. We didn't have the world speed of sending a plant someplace else, much less the speed of communications where I can do a Zoom meeting and show people right now what I'm doing to share it with somebody doing the same thing, say in Asia. That's wonderful. And it's a magnificent way through Dayton to bridge the gap so that collegial farmers, no matter where in the world they are, can bring their thoughts and their products together, especially to events that happen here from international people coming into Miami.